Hey everyone, we are so excited to the reaction in the community for the pod. I need to take a moment of your time to tell you to please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or hit the follow button on Spotify. We are in the humble beginning stage of our show and establishing a listener base is of paramount importance and will help us determine the frequency of future episodes. Thanks and enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to Neuse Little Podcast, an audio program discussing the almost 50-year history of Neuse Little Theatre and the backstage antics and stories that come along with running a community theater in a small town. I'm your host, Matt Gore, and we are coming to you from NLT's stage and base of operations, the little log cabin located on the banks of the Neuse River in Smithfield, North Carolina. We lovingly refer to it as the Hut. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us here on another episode of Neuse Little Podcast. We have a very special episode for you today. I have a gentleman sitting across the table from me who I'm very excited to talk to. I've wanted to get him on since the very beginning. A lot of our previous guests have had stories about him and spoken very fondly of him. And I probably worked with him as me an actor and him as a director more than any other person, I believe. I think it's 6 times. And I've learned a lot from this gentleman. And I am incredibly excited to introduce Tony Pender to the podcast. How you doing, Tony?
Oh, good, Matt. Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you for coming. I really do appreciate it. Well, let's dive right in. I don't want to waste any time here because I do see this as a true privilege to get you on here as one-on-one with a conversation.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
And so what's it been like for you? Everybody has their own stories of dealing with 2020 and the pandemic. What's it been like for you on your end, sir?
Oh, man. It's I guess it's the same with me as it has been with everybody else. I'm missing people a lot. One of the biggest reasons why I constantly come back to community theater is because that's what it is. It's a community. And not being able to be part of that has been probably the biggest challenge. I've been able to develop an online presence, and that's great. But it's not the same as actually being in the same room with people trying to accomplish a goal together.
Right.
And sitting out on the porch and shooting the crap and that kind of thing. And I did almost as much directing on the porch as I did in the actual theater.
Interesting. Now, well, let the listeners know what it is you do for a living. What pays the bills for you?
Oh boy, I teach. That's probably my biggest source of income. Is I teach acting and I teach stagecraft, how to build, how to create, how to paint, how to use a 2x4, that kind of thing. My biggest group of people I teach right now are young people, which I think is probably one of my biggest things. I think that I'm not getting any younger. Somebody else has got to be able to do this. And the things that I've learned along the way, I really, really loved. And I want to make sure that I can pass that along to other people that I work with, especially younger people. And especially now, because getting them an opportunity to express themselves in any way, shape, or form has been probably the biggest joy. I had to write a letter of recommendation to one of my previous students because they were interviewing for School of the Arts, the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. And it really took me back because when that person first came into our group, they must have been a freshman in high school. And at that point in time, they were just a visual artist. They liked to draw, they liked to paint, and they were just looking for a new way to express themselves. And when they got into the theater, just giving them the opportunity to do things in a different way, to express themselves in a different way, has been a real joy. And it was great to see this person move on and take that somewhere, so that they're not just drawing pictures in their notebook at school anymore. They're actually going to be able to turn this into a career. So yeah, that's one of the biggest things I've been doing over the pandemic. That, and trying to broaden my own horizons to see if there are things that I could see better, do better. Like all of us, I've had to become a techno wizard.
Yeah.
So that I could have that online presence, and so that I could keep that teaching part up. I think one of the things I'm proudest of at the moment is one of my young people took part of the ESU Shakespeare competition, placed second.
Awesome.
So she's going to regionals, playing Henry V,
Awesome.
which I think is freaking awesome, especially for somebody that age. She's a sophomore in high school and had never done Shakespeare before in her life. Was way too scared of it. But once we got a chance to actually work together and to work with another group of people who were all trying to tackle this whole thing of what Shakespeare is together, she fell in love with it. She fell in love with the language, the way to express herself, and the fact that that the material was good enough that you could fit it to anybody who stepped into it, because it was pretty universal. And that's
Yeah.
been good.
Yeah, we for a theater podcast, we really haven't discussed Shakespeare a whole lot. We mentioned it briefly. You directed the first ever, and as of now only, Shakespeare production. I want to change that, by the way. Only Shakespeare production we've had here in NLT. A very interesting version of Midsummer Night's Dream that's very North Carolina centric, very regional centric. Talk a little bit about that. How'd you come up with the concept of setting Midsummer in a rural setting that has like tobacco barns and
Yeah.
old Coca-Cola signs and stuff like that? How did that come about?
Oh, wow. Well, one of the things that I'd always been taught as part of my training was that Shakespeare was a writer who wrote of his time and of the place he was in, but he wrote it in such a way that it could be taken anywhere. That was kind of the whole idea. He was. That was kind of the whole idea of when he was originally writing, was that he understood that he was going to have to pack this show up and take it somewhere. So he knew that it was going to be different in every single place that it was going to be performed. So he wrote it accordingly. One of the reasons I felt comfortable enough to do it here was, and probably one of the reasons why I'm going to keep working here as often as I get asked to, is that this particular community of individuals, this particular community of people who perform really are the most giving human beings I think I may have ever met in my life. They are always willing to take their own experiences and their own lives and make them part of any production that they do. And they're not afraid to put it up here on stage. And with a 110-seat theater, you can pretty much guarantee that about a third of the audience is going to be somebody in their family. And still they're not afraid to share that. So when it came to doing a Shakespeare piece, I was like, we have to take not just the words, but the people who live here and make their experience part of this show, so that it's not just here's some group of really smart people who do things that we could never do, showing us what things might look like. It was more a case of, here we are together exploring this material that everybody thinks is so hard and so deep, and finding ourselves in it. And that's really what Shakespeare has always been about. It's been about looking at the material and finding yourself in it. Mm-hmm. And he makes it pretty easy, honestly, if you approach it that way.
Yeah, if you unlock it. If you get past the language and see what he's trying to do, it's just like anybody can do this.
You're absolutely right. One of the things I think that surprised most of the people that I've been teaching Shakespeare to over the past year and a half since this whole thing happened was the fact that everybody thought that because it was poetry it had to be done a specific way, but brother, he wrote it in iambic pentameter, and iambic means that the stress is on the second beat of the syllable, right? That means that it's ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. It also means that since it's in pentameter, that it's 5 beats, 5 of those iambics per line. That means ba-bump, 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 ba-bump. The other thing that sounds like that, ba-bump, 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 is the human heartbeat. Once you get that in your head and you start reading the lines again, you can feel that not just in your head and understanding it, but you can feel that in your heart and the way it beats. And you start to understand then why the stresses are where they are and why the words are where they are, because it makes your heart beat faster, because it makes your heart beat slower. And then it becomes, it's not about poetry anymore, it's about how this person's heart is beating as they speak. And yeah,
Good stuff.
yeah. Well, and it really has been one of the things I've been able to do now as part of that is take some of the other language that we use, because writers are being married to one.
Yeah, Adrienne Pender.
Writers are real special people. They understand the way words are crafted, not just the way sentences and paragraphs and stories are crafted. Writers understand how words are crafted, and they use those words in a very specific way to let the inner life of a human being out. And it's been almost as fun finding that in other writers as it has been in finding it in Shakespeare. I think Shakespeare was the kicker and the kick-off, but it's always been there. For example, I've done To Kill a Mockingbird I don't know how many times. I know I've done it twice here, but I'd love to be able to do it. I want to continue to come back to it, and the reason is because every time you come back to it, the way it was written, you find more and more and more, and that's because of how it was written and how much was put into the words that were chosen and the order that they were chosen and who says them and what happens in between when those people speak those words.
So you mentioned that you're married to a writer.
I sure am.
And she's a very accomplished writer, I might add.
she is.
Very impressive resume. And we could talk about some of her work briefly. She actually has written a play that was turned into a movie, correct?
Yes, she has. Yes, she has.
The premiere of that play was at Theater in the Park down there in Raleigh. It was a play called In. And briefly, what was that about?
It's about the relationship between Charles Gilpin and Eugene O'Neill when he wrote The Emperor Jones, because it was originally written for Charles Gilpin, and how their relationship developed and changed over the process of developing that play into one of Eugene O'Neill's biggest hits, and one of the biggest hits of that particular time period. It also happened to be the very first show that an African American actor was allowed to play an African American on stage. On a Broadway stage. So that was a whole thing. And eventually what ends up happening is the focus of the key to the whole title of the play, which is N, is about Gilpin refusing to say the N-word. And O'Neill was a writer, and he chose a specific word for a specific reason and was adamant about it being used. And eventually it blew up into a huge, huge fight where Gilpin started taking even more liberties with the script, and O'Neill became more and more outraged about it. So it blew up into a huge, big fight until O'Neill fired Gilpin and hired Paul Robeson to play the Emperor Jones, which really... Robeson was a pretty famous actor at that point, anyway, but giving him the lead role in Emperor Jones really kicked off his career, and Paul Robeson went on to become a famous, huge African-American actor of his day. And Gilpin ended up losing everything, and in fact, he ended up passing away at the chicken ranch that he bought his mother when he was in money. Yeah. And he's one of those people that's kind of lost to history. Luckily enough, my wife found that she was a distant relative.
Of Gilpin?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
She's,
Wow.
Yeah, she's a distant relative, like 5 removed. But one of the things that she's always done is she's loved researching her own family history, and she's turned that into a couple of things. She's turned it into a book, and she's turned it into another play. And when she found out that Gilpin was one of her relatives, she really started digging into his story and came to find out exactly how much of an impact he had on the ability of African Americans to be working actors. It's not like they're in a perfect place now, but Gilpin made it possible for African American actors to actually step on stage as themselves. He's one of the people who began the ending, let's put it that way. He began the ending of the era of blackface, which I think is a great thing, and something she's really proud of. And she did a really beautiful job, in my personal opinion, of portraying what that was like. One of the things that has happened is that a number of people or a number of organizations that have looked at the material, and quite often they've come back with feedback for her, and one of the biggest pieces of feedback she gets is, could this be stronger? Could this make a stronger statement? And one of the things I'm probably most proud of her for is the fact that she said, no, it's not a statement for a cause. It is about a human being's life. And I'm going to stick to that. It's about this man's life. And I've got to be true to that. And it's been a challenge for her, but she stuck through it all the way, and I will never cease my admiration for her for that.
In my humble opinion, that takes true courage.
It really does. And, especially now, I think it's important that we understand that people are people, regardless of what makes them different from us. They're still human beings. That means that they get up every morning, they put their clothes on the same way everybody else does. They eat like everybody else does. They go to the bathroom like everybody else does. And the fact that they make it through day by day by day is good enough.
So transitioning into you as a director. Now, you're the best director I've ever worked with, and it's probably because I've worked with you a lot. But the concept of a theater director wasn't defined. It was defined as an idea by Ruth Mills, my theater arts teacher. Like, this is what they do. But as just a true artist, I really didn't get it till I saw you work.
Well, I appreciate that, man. God bless you for saying so.
Well, your uncanny ability to draw incredible performances out of most of the actors you come across is something that you make it look so easy, and I know it is not.
No, it's not. And I couldn't always, and honestly, man, I couldn't always do that. I mean, if there are people listening who worked with me back when I first started here, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, they'll remember I was not exactly the best director in the world. God knows. It took...
Well, let's take it back then. Since you brought it up, let's go ahead and take it back. Let's talk about your origin at Neuse Little Theatre.
Okay. Wow.
How'd you get here?
Oh, geez. Okay. So, honestly, I grew up in Four Oaks, so I didn't even get into this whole theater thing until I was a senior in high school. I played one of Doolittle's flunkies in My Fair Lady with Debbie Elam playing Liza Doolittle. And got bit by the bug. But I didn't follow it up until years later. And when I did, I followed it up as being an actor. So I approached this whole thing from being an actor first. And I think that's probably, if I've got any talent as a director, that's probably where the roots of it came from, was actually being an actor and being on the other end of the stick. And understanding what worked for me and what didn't. And I went to School of the Arts, and when I left School of the Arts, one of the things that the assistant dean said, he called me in and talked to me about me leaving and about what I was going to do next. And he goes, "Listen, from what I've seen here, you should give a try at directing." And I thought he was an idiot. And I was honestly upset that he said that, because I wanted to be an actor. But honestly, he was pretty Cassandra-like in that one. Years later, I went on and did my acting thing, and I did stage performance, and then went on to film and television and all that kind of good stuff.
You were Okay, let's briefly touch on that.
Oh shit.
I've always wanted to talk. I've always wanted to talk about that without
Yeah.
sounding gauche or
What?
like. Tell me about the famous stuff you did, Tony.
no.
You know,
There's
you were on
nothing.
I know. But you were on a couple episodes of Matt
Matlock, yeah.
Okay. You had.
I've got to chime in here because it was on the other day and we were flipping through the channels and Steven, I stopped and I always stop when I see it on and Steven goes, is that the one Tony's in? And I was like, I don't think so. And we were like, we watched for a few minutes like, no, this isn't it. We kept flipping. It was
Oh, it can be found. The internet exists.
Oh, child, the internet definitely exists.
We're all right. We might cut this out because this might be totally wrong. But I remember early on. Were you in a movie with Robert Duvall?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Tell me
yeah.
about that.
Oh man. Yeah. It's called Ramblin' Rose.
You were running away. Like, it was a scene of him chasing you on a porch, and you're running away.
Oh, yeah, I
And
am.
it's like a baby Tony Pender running away from a mad Robert Duvall.
Oh, which was really funny at the time because honestly, I'm taller than Bobby Duvall, which is hysterical. But yeah, no, it was great. I got a chance to actually meet the man, and he's brother. When he is acting, he is not even playing. He is not even playing. We got into the film was shot out in the middle of nowhere, Burgall Beach, North Carolina, out in the middle of a field, like literally 20 miles from the nearest other habitation. So it was a self-enclosed kind of set, and we all had our own honey wagons, of course, and Duvall had his own trailer set up. And I remember the day we went to shoot, they picked us all up at our wagons, and they went by to pick up Bobby at his place, and he had this little terrier, his pet dog, with him, and playing with a balloon and shit. At any rate, so we picked him up, or we tried to, because apparently somebody on set had made him mad. And he proceeded to come out with a series of expletives and said, "I'll walk to the set," which is not a small distance from where the wagons were, because it had to be. But once we got on the set, again, brother was real specific about what he wanted to do and how he did it.
So there's some truck driver driving down the road going, "Is that Bobby Duvall with the terrier on the side of the road?"
Pretty much.
Wow.
But you had to be. It wouldn't just be a truck driver. It would be like somebody, in their pickup, going down a dirt road between tobacco fields.
I loved you in Tender Mercies.
Exactly, and he'd probably, cuss them as they leave. No, but when it came to our time to actually work, gosh, he was focused. He was really focused. And honestly, as a newer person involved in filming, it was really good to have that. In fact, one of the things I found is that regardless of how big people are, when it comes time to act, we're all doing the same thing. And the whole sense of community that you get here in a small community theater, you get the same thing on a set. And especially when you're working with bigger people, unless they're total jerks to begin with, which, some people are, but unless they're total jerks to begin with, that they're part of that little community. And they, just like everybody else, do just as much work to make things happen as they can. I know one of the things that we've always talked about is in rehearsal, you try everything, right? You try everything, and if this one doesn't work, then you try it a different way. Nothing epitomizes that more is when they were filming Billy Bathgate. They were filming Billy Bathgate in Wilmington, and Dustin Hoffman had like a 3-line scene. And he literally made us do 27 takes.
Now, when you say he made you, are
Yeah.
you saying Dustin Hoffman made you?
Oh, yeah.
So he was like, "No, it's not
He's
right."
in the scene. No, he's in the scene,
Okay.
playing a character that has 3 lines. And he got us to redo it 27 times so he could do those 3 lines.
How many takes were you averaging so far?
Huh?
How many takes were you averaging so far?
1.
Wow.
But it wasn't my lines, it was his. That was the whole point, is he wanted to make sure that he could do every single permutation of those 3 lines that he could possibly do. And he ended up doing 27 takes of it.
Wow.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well,
I mean,
you
it
know,
was-
if he did 27 versions, then they could cut it however they wanted to, and they
Yeah.
didn't.
yeah.
At that point, though, the director's like, let's choose the worst one.
Yeah.
But no.
Oh, listen, it's been, whoo, filming and TV stories. Oh my lord, my lord. It's a whole different animal than, well, not a whole different, but it's a different animal than working on stage and working live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, what got you from having a small acting career to transitioning to teaching and directing and arriving here at NLT?
Well, I've always been teaching. I fell into that one completely by accident. One of my acting buddies was teaching at a little Montessori school, and got a gig and asked me if I could take his classes for him. And I was like, he's like, they're small classes. It's a Montessori school. They let you pretty much do what you want to. So I was like, okay, sure. What are you doing so far? And he told me, so I jumped in and did it and fell in love. That's probably one of the luckiest breaks that I've had. Is I started my actual teaching at a Montessori school, which is sensory based anyway. The Montessori teaching method is very focused on whole teaching, and it's sensory teaching. And as you know, acting is all about senses and awareness and that kind of good thing. So it was a really, really, really good fit. God, I could tell you some stories about that too.
We got time.
Yeah, well, the whole.
Go ahead. Listen.
No, there's a
heads up, folks. This might be a two-parter. Go ahead.
See, no, there's a combo story here about my film career and teaching. So I'd been teaching at this Montessori school for about 3 years, and George Lucas wanted to do a film called Radioland Murders, and it was the same time he was shooting Jurassic Park. And they were doing Jurassic Park on the West Coast. They were doing Radioland Murders here on the East Coast, and I got cast in Radioland and worked on that. Oh man, it was a long, long job.
Forgive me, Tony. Do you mean Spielberg?
No, I mean George Lucas.
Okay, I apologize. Please continue.
No, because Lucas backed Jurassic Park,
Okay.
and he got the dailies. Because I remember being in the room when they were getting dailies from Jurassic Park.
Okay.
Because when he was on the East Coast, he'd get Jurassic Park dailies. When he was on the West Coast, he would get Radioland Murder dailies. So, I worked on that. I must have worked on that film for 3, maybe 4 months.
Which film?
Radioland.
Okay.
I must have worked on that film for like 3, maybe 4 months. And we wrapped it. It was great. I was in a bunch of scenes, got to work with some great people, some big names, all that kind of good stuff. It was back when Joey Lawrence was still a thing. Yeah. Brian Ben, Larry Miller.
I have heard of Larry Miller. He is a
Yeah.
comedian.
Yeah, he is. He's a good one, too. At any rate, so was Brian Ben. He had his own TV show on HBO there for a while. At any rate, so we wrapped the film, and I'm teaching, and all that kind of good stuff, because I've been teaching the whole time. And I was the only drama teacher in the school. And we had developed it to a point so that I was teaching the entire school, kindergarten to 6th grade. And at the end of the year, we set it up so that each segment, K through 2, 2 through 4, 5th and 6th, each one of those groups of kids got to do their own little final thing. So we were rolling right along, and it was a good show. We were doing, it was a good show. The little people were doing rainbow fish. So we had been working the entire year, really, because it's usually a year-long project. And at the end of Christmas break, when we come back, we really knuckled down into it, and then we did our final production in May at the end of school. So I get a call about 3 weeks before the end of school from the producers for Radioland saying, we need you in LA for reshoots, because we're adding people to the film, and you're the thread that ties them into the film.
So they're expanding your character in the script.
Yeah, they're expanding my character, and the only reason that they're expanding my character is because they're adding other characters to the script. Which is understandable because one of the characters that they're adding is Rosemary Clooney. So my agent is like, Tony, you got to do this. And I'm like, I would love to. When do they want to shoot? And they went in 3 weeks. I'm like, Mary James, I can't. My kid, there's nobody to take my place. And we're 3 weeks away from these kids doing their production. I cannot leave now. Even their English teacher couldn't continue what we're doing because I'm working with the entire school. And we've got
But Tony, baby, it's Rosemary Clooney. Come
Exactly,
on now.
Exactly, which is what she said. And I was like, Mary James, I can't do it. I can't. You're just going to have to tell them no. And Mary James thought I was an idiot.
Wow.
But, you know, I made a commitment to these guys, and we've been working on it all year long. There's no way I'm going to leave them in the last minute going, you guys got this. You know, they're little people, man.
Yeah.
They're not going to understand that.
Yeah.
So Mary James said, let me see what I could do, and she did, and they went back and forth for about a week. So what ended up happening was about, let's see, it must have been Monday? Yeah. My kids' show is on Thursday night. Monday morning at 5 o'clock, they knocked on my door in downtown Wilmington and had a limousine waiting and drove me to the Wilmington airport, put me on a one-way flight to LAX. Got me there. A limo met me at LAX. They took me to set, got everything ready, made sure that my costume matched, my makeup matched, all that kind of good stuff, and I shot a couple of prerequisites. We went through the day. It was Monday, Tuesday. Spent all day Tuesday shooting, all day Wednesday shooting. Thursday morning, they picked me up at my hotel in a limousine, drove me to LAX, put me on a direct flight back to Wilmington, North Carolina, picked me up at the Wilmington airport in a limousine, and drove me to my kids' show.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, number one, it taught me that you got to stick to your guns. And number two, it taught me that if you do good enough work, people recognize it, and they'll move heaven and earth
They'll fight for you.
to make it happen. Yeah. And both Mary James and the producers did that. Mel, the director, you know him because he's one of the Monty Python group from Mel Smith.
Mel Smith, yeah.
Yeah, he was the director. And he fought for me. So I'll never forget that as long as I live. But that's kind of it's one of the things that kind of thing happened quite a lot. Nothing that extreme, of course, but I got a really good reputation, especially being a one-take Charlie. People would call me and say, we've got a scene that we need to shoot tomorrow. Can we fax you the sides?
That's awesome. And you go in tomorrow and shoot it. You know,
Yeah,
your
exactly. And we
wardrobe
get it
at 4
done.
a.m.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And we get it done in one take. So there was a big demand. There was a big demand for me to work. Well, it wasn't huge, but it was pretty steady. Not a lot of big stuff, but some consistent stuff. I got to try to kill Danny with a backhoe.
Who?
Danny's one of the characters on Matlock.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's all right.
I know.
No worries, man.
Sorry. My grandparents definitely watch Matlock.
Yeah, I know.
Did you get to meet Andy Griffith?
Oh boy, did I get
We're
to
in
meet
North
him.
Carolina. We got to talk about Andy Griffith.
Yeah.
I would be fired from the podcast if we didn't at least bring up Andy Griffith.
Oh, yeah. No, listen, at the point that I met him, it was later on in his career and later on in his life, and he was of an age. And you could tell he was from North Carolina, brother, because he was just like my dad. Yeah.
I have heard stories about late stage Andy Griffith.
Yeah.
And
Oh, listen, we start when we start, and when we're done, we're done.
oh my, is it?
I don't care if you are or not, we're done.
Were you the one that told me the story that at 5 o'clock he's like, "Yep, I'll see you guys tomorrow."
Yeah.
He was done.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
out.
we could be in the middle of a scene, and it was time to him to leave. See you, boys. See you tomorrow.
I mean, he's an old man. I mean,
No, well, I kind of, well, you know, because when he was in the thick of his career, brother, he was everywhere all the time and had no freaking life. He had no life. And as he got up there, he was like, I will have the life I want because I want it and I've worked hard for it. Got to give him good kudos for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah, was he a grumpy old man? Yeah, he'd give Jack Lemmon a run for his money.
Jack Lemmon was grumpy?
Yeah.
What did you work with him on?
Oh, my God. I don't even remember. It was a real quick in and out kind of thing. I was on the side of the
You're
set.
just dropping names. I'm just like, Jack
No,
Lemmon, what are you talking about?
No, brother. Listen, at the end of the day, everybody puts on their pants the same way.
I know.
And we're all actors. I don't give a damn what your, excuse me, I don't care what your name is that we're all actors and we're all trying to do the same thing. Brother, I had a scene, you should have seen, you'll love this one. Here, you want to hear a story?
Please.
I'm doing a, oh my God. I'm doing a show, I'm doing a film, and I'd been doing musical theater, razzmatazz, summer stock. And I got cast in this film with Alan Parker directing.
I know who Mississippi Burning.
Yeah.
Great director.
Yeah, really good director.
Yeah,
brother.
yeah.
But I'm doing a film with Bridget Fonda, Matthew Broderick, and God bless it, I hate not knowing all these names. Say Anything.
John Cusack.
Yeah. So I'm doing this movie and I'm doing a scene with John Cusack, Matthew Broderick, and Bridget Fonda.
I have heard of all of these people.
Yeah, me too. And I had to, listen, I was standing there in front of these people. So we're doing a scene, right?
Uh-huh.
And I've been doing musical theater for the entire summer, so I'm still in let me give you a curtain call mode.
Jazz fingers.
Yeah. Jazz fingers, bro. And it's Alan Parker, you know. Yeah, this is not musical theater time. So I did the scene. And by this time, I'd established a pretty decent reputation as a one-take Charlie, and I did this scene, and Parker was just not having it.
Okay.
And he's like, do it again, Tony, but could you turn it down a notch? So I did, and he goes, Cut, Tony, you've got to pull it back. You've got to pull it back. In the meantime, at the table are sitting Bridget Fonda and John Cusack and Matthew Broderick. I mean, I couldn't even reach out to Broderick and go, brother, you understand where I'm coming from.
He was like, no, I'm reading the script. It's called Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
See?
I don't know if I'm going to do it, though.
You know, and so I ended up having to do 7 takes of it before I got it right. And on the 5th take, at this point, I'm frustrated with myself. And I'm like, well, if he wants me to take it to nothing, brother, I'll take it to nothing.
Okay.
That's exactly what I did. I took it to absolute nothing. I mean, you could have put a dime store dummy where I was standing and gotten more.
Talking scenery.
Yeah, exactly. Talking scenery. That's exactly right. And Parker goes, cut. Well, you're going to have to bleep this. Well, it seems as if we've succeeded in scaring the shit out of Tony.
I will not bleep that.
Yeah, but it was hysterical, and you know, we did the 6th take, and I turned it up a little bit more, and but it took me 7 takes to get that right, and especially working with Alan Parker, I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
But
Academy Award nominated director.
Yeah, see?
Yes.
But I'm sure he remembered it. God knows he would have to, because it was frustrating for him as it was for me. And they were really cool about it.
This is weird, but
Why?
I have heard of another Alan Parker story. I listened to this podcast called The Tobolowsky Files back in the day about this actor named Stephen Tobolowsky, who was married to Beth Henley, who wrote Crimes of the Heart, and is a very accomplished character actor. And he said that when he was doing Mississippi Burning, that Alan Parker, he was in like 2 scenes. He was brilliant, but he was only in 2 scenes. He was it was a small character part. And Alan Parker kind of took him through everything. It's like, well, Stephen, how would you shoot this scene? You know, how would you do this setup? And it was just like, and Stephen didn't know how to respond to that, because I'm like, this guy is asking me how I would shoot this scene. What if I tell him something that's stupid? You know?
Yeah.
So it's got to be intimidating. Yeah.
It is, but at the same time, you got to give the man kudos for taking this little bit actor who was on his set and doing those 7 takes.
Yeah.
Not only to get what he wanted, but to get what he wanted from me. And that taught me, if nothing else, patience. I didn't have that when I first started directing, because it hadn't sunk in yet. Because Because when I first started directing, I'm sure some of the folks out here remember, I was a jerk.
I got you late, so
Yeah.
I don't
Just
know.
for context, Alan Parker has directed Evita,
Yeah.
The Life of David Gale, Angela's Ashes, The Road to Wellville,
Yeah.
and Mississippi Burning, which is a Midnight Express. Come on, just for a little bit of context there.
Yeah.
So, transitioning into you arriving here, tell me how that happened. I know.
So by the time I'd been doing all this stuff, I was doing stage, I was doing film, I was doing television, I was doing the teaching thing, and I got burnt out. I mean, literally having people call you up and say, can you be in Atlanta tomorrow? Can you be in Charleston tomorrow night? Can you be, you know what I'm saying? After a while, if there's no rest at all, you turn it into a giant French fry. And I turned into a giant French fry. And there was, as there always is, there is an impetus to any major change in life. So I was given that impetus. And it just so happened that at that time, my dad and my sister both were building houses. And I'd been doing tech work and set building and all that kind of good, happy stuff. And I knew my way around tools and carpentry and yada, yada. So I decided to come up here and give them a hand. And I did. I actually got a chance to lay bricks for the first time, which was very cool. But I did. I came back up here and to give myself some family time and to give myself a break and not be around it so much. So that it didn't turn into more than a career. Do you know what I mean? There's a difference between a career and an obsession. Mm-hmm. And it felt like it was becoming less of a career and more as an obsession. And it felt like I had less and less control over that. So I went, I got to take a break and get back my control over what I'm doing. So I did. And I didn't do anything. Gosh, I didn't do anything performance related, including teach. Gosh, it must be for a good 6 months. And then, I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody in my family had mentioned that there was this little theater over in Smithfield that were getting ready to do some kind of an audition or something. So I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I really want to do this. But it's community theater. It's a small place. I don't have to turn it on.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And I came down and auditioned. And I met some of the people. And when I did, I recognized almost immediately they were doing it for the same reason that I originally decided to do it, which was that they loved it and they needed to do it. So I was like, well, okay, I got some people who really love what they're doing, they need to do what they're doing, and they're not asking a whole lot. Just to become part of what it is that we're doing. Mm-hmm. So I did.
What show was that?
God.
It wasn't Little Shop, was it?
No. Good God, no.
Yeah, he was doing another stuff for that.
It was what's the one where the guys had to dress up as girls?
Oh, it's community theater. Got to narrow that down.
No, it's the lingerie salespeople. Because I think the first thing that I did was I came in and offered my services to help build the sets. Mm-hmm. I think that's what originally I did because that was probably where they needed the most help at that time. It was Jim and
Scott.
Yeah, it was Jim and Scott. It was the Jim and Scott show, and they did beautiful work. God Almighty, did they do beautiful work? But they were doing it by them damn selves.
Right. They needed some help.
And boy, howdy! And I was like, man, I can hold a 2x4. Mm-hmm. So I started doing that. Then I started to see the quality of the shows that they were doing. And it wasn't that they were like, Tony Award level shows, but boy, did they love doing it.
Right.
Being a part of the performing arts and entertainment industry for as long as I have, one of the things that you recognize is that in some places there's always going to be cliques. But man, at that point I was like in my 20s. I was in my late 20s, getting ready to go into my 30s. I was like, I'm not in high school anymore. I don't need cliques.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing I want to get involved in. And one of the things I found here was that wasn't here.
Mm-hmm.
That it really was like walking into somebody's home and them saying, there's a chair, grab it and pull up. Do you want a biscuit and a cup of coffee? We got one. Yeah, and that's the way it's always been. And from that moment, I was like, I don't care whatever you guys want to do. Let me know what it is, and I'll help be part of it. It has to be. It has to grow, and it has to be kept the way it is. No, not kept the way it is, but that spirit has to remain regardless of what we do.
Yes. Yeah, I think that what you said right there is very important. Yes, there changes will happen.
Yeah.
Shows will evolve.
Yeah.
But that spirit has to remain the same.
And it has. I mean, I've been here now, 20-some years, 30, I don't know, but a long time. And it has. It's remained that way the whole way. It's always been less about doing billions and billions of dollars and making sure that everybody and their brother got a button a seat. It really has been about bringing everybody together, sharing stories, sharing music, sharing. That's been what it's about.
Sharing.
Whether you've been on the stage, off the stage, or in the seats, that's really been what it's about this whole time. And that's one of the things that I'm happy to see that has never changed. And I'm hoping that it doesn't ever.
We're trying our best. All right, Neuse Little Pod listeners, we hope you've enjoyed our conversation with the great Tony Pender. We know we sure did, which is why we are splitting this interview into 2 parts. That's right, it's going to be our second ever 2-parter. Tune in 2 weeks from now and hear more from this interview. But for now, we thank you for listening, and please don't be afraid to tell us what you think of the podcast. Hit us up on the Neuse Little Theatre Facebook page or drop us a review on Apple Podcast. We'd sure like to hear from you, the audience, on how we can make the show better. Credits for the show. Your host and creator is Matt Gore. That's me. My producer and editor is Mita Toole.
That's me.
Music is by Cody Walker. Please go look up Cody on Cody Walker Music on YouTube, and he's also on Cody Walker Music on Facebook as well. He's local, so and he's got a couple of albums out. So why don't you give him a listen? Easy listening, John Denver type of guitar voice. That Cody Walker. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.